I'd now like you to view a PSA. What is a PSA? It stands for Public Service Announcement. It is a message of public interest which is aired by the media without charge. The objective is to raise awareness about changing public attitudes and behavior towards the abuse of children and the damaging effects this can have on such innocent victims.
They're finally going to be gone. All these despicable enemies, finally, they're out of the way.
Please watch.
The database, Mr. Briggs. Why should the Jehovah's Witnesses keep a database of men who have confessed to being paedophiles, but the police aren't told? Do you think that's reasonable behaviour, Mr. Briggs?
In a letter to Dateline, the church's general counsel adds that it is possible that a few of the 77,799 elders of Jehovah's Witnesses have not followed the direction that they have been given regarding investigating and reporting child abuse.
So how many names are on the secret database? We asked the headquarters in New York. They refused to tell us. Focusing on numbers isn't meaningful, they said.
I was given a figure of over 20,000. Two different sources came back to me and said that number is actually more specific and gave me a figure of 23,720. They told me that they had accessed the internal database, and that figure was based on child molesters in the USA, Canada, and Europe. And that's the figure that they were given.
We again asked for an interview with their spokesman, Paul Gillies. When he refused, we phoned him, told him we were recording, and asked a simple question. Are elders told to report allegations of abuse to the police or not?
The elders' guideline is, if you get any single allegation of child abuse come to your attention, phone this office.
Why phone this office? Why not phone your local police station?
Well, you see, the first thing is we have to make sure for the protection of the child. That's
is it the protection of the
priority.
child, or is it fair to ask you, isn't it the protection of the church that comes straight to mind there?
It is the protection of the child. We have a child protection policy.
Another way we can contribute to the oneness, rejecting false stories that are designed to separate us from Jehovah's organization. As an example, think about the apostate-driven lies and dishonesties that Jehovah's organization is permissive toward pedophiles. I mean, that is ridiculous, isn't it? If anybody takes action against someone who would threaten our young ones and takes action to protect our young ones, it's Jehovah's organization. We reject outright such lies.
And you accept, of course, that your organization, including people in positions of responsibility like elders, are not immune from the problem of child sexual abuse.
That appears to be the case.
Rot from within.
Those elders wouldn't have any specific training in dealing with allegations of child sexual abuse. They might have spiritual training in terms of scriptural advice, support and assistance, but there wouldn't be any sort of practical training necessarily. Am I correct in thinking that?
Well, the practical training is basically reviewing the material, reviewing our policies on child abuse. Such as has been mentioned, they get the shepherding or the flock handbook that's given to elders. They would go through that, which is giving them specific instructions about how to handle such matters. So we do train our elders according to our guidelines and our ways of handling allegations of child abuse.
Right. Okay.
There is a problem with child abuse. It's getting worse and worse and has done over the years.
So that was the truth.
It is the inquiry's view that the charity's trustees did not cooperate openly and transparently with the Commission. They did not provide accurate and complete answers to the Commission regarding the earlier allegations, and they did not report a serious incident to the Commission.
But the person is still otherwise in the world and can associate with people outside of the church. Yes. And you don't take into consideration, do you, how people outside of the church might be kept safe from such a person whom you're not satisfied will not reoffend?
If they were outside the church and they were a close friend, I would tell them.
Well, and how would you know if they're a close friend and they're outside of the church?
If they're a close friend of mine.
A close friend of yours?
If I was.
Yes.
If I associated with them.
Well, what about people who are not close friends of yours, others than outside of the church? You don't take any steps, do you, to protect them from this potential reoffending? You don't, do you? You're concerned with the congregation principally, aren't you?
We're concerned with the congregations. We are shepherds of the congregation.
Yes, and you're not a shepherd to those who are not in the congregation.
No.
And as an organisation, in your experience, you don't seek to protect or take care of children who are outside of the congregation.
That's a broad statement.
Well, I can limit it.
Yeah, limit it,
In
please.
your decision on whether or not to disfellowship someone, you don't take consideration of children outside of the congregation.
Do take consideration of them, but what ability have we got to protect every child in Australia?
Well, what you can do is you can report to the child protection authorities.
And that is done in some cases.
But generally it's not done, is it?
No.
It's not done unless there's a legal requirement for it to be done, is there?
That is true.
They're warned about that individual.
But there's not a warning that goes to the congregation generally. Simply the parents would be visited on an individual basis. That's right, isn't it?
That is correct.
Some examples of their strange teachings are that the faithful slave protects pedophiles.
The latest name added to the list should be that of James Barrett. 3 days ago, clutching his Bible, this elder from Rugby was convicted of indecently assaulting 2 boys and sentenced to 2 years in prison. The church was told of the allegations 5 years ago, but Barrett denied them and was allowed to remain an elder.
From your own accounts and your own records, there have been a number of elders and those who've had senior positions within the church who have been responsible for child sexual abuse.
Bald-faced lies.
We've talked about there not being any sort of child protection department centrally or locally, because it sounds as if you don't have an elder who's in charge of child protection, for example.
We feel that any elder can be approached on child safeguarding matters.
So you don't have some other religious organisations that we've had evidence from. They will have a sort of child protection department that will often be staffed by people who may share the same religious beliefs, but who will have outside expertise in social work, usually social work, the probation service, education sometimes the law. You don't have that kind of department or that kind of arrangement.
Not in that organised way, no, simply because we don't feel it relates to what we do as a religion.
The NSPCC looked at your policies quite a long time ago now, back in 2009. We have a copy of the report they made. You can see the recommendation there was that the Watchtower, Bible and Tract Society of Britain should seek child protection professional assistance in developing their organisational safeguarding systems, either via a local safeguarding children's board or via an independent child protection consultancy, for example, the NSPCC or others. Have you by any chance used either of those organisations, either a local safeguarding children's board or an organisation such as the NSPCC, to help you devise the child protection systems you have?
The answer is no.
Well, what happened?
The cases that we are here to announce are deeply disturbing. The allegations hard to imagine, while all sharing one common tie. The 19 victims and 4 men who are being charged with sexually violating them are all members of the Jehovah's Witness organization.
As you likely know, Jehovah's Witnesses take a stronger position than most on the scriptural inappropriateness of any form of immorality. However, to take advantage of innocent young ones is absolutely despicable.
Most of these defendants used their faith and church to gain access to their victims, to build their trust, and then molested them. Children who have a right to grow up in a safe community, but were defiled by members of their own congregations. Some defendants only looked as far as their own families to commit their abuse. My office will not stop until these defendants are held accountable for the crimes against innocent children and until justice is achieved for these courageous survivors.
It is only in the past 40 years or so that the magnitude and the extent of the problem has become better known. This is because governmental agencies are now determined to take a more active interest in this problem.
Would the people in the service department or the legal department that might receive telephone calls, would any of them received any specific training in child protection?
When you say specific training, yes, they're given specific training as far as our policies and familiarising themselves with our policies.
Just over a year ago, Bill Bowen rang the legal desk in New York, asking how he should handle an allegation of abuse in his congregation. The advice he was given has little to do with protecting the victim. He was told to go back to the man accused.
You just ask him again, now, is there anything to this? If he says no, then I would walk away from it. Yeah. Leave it for Jehovah. He'll bring it out. Yeah. But don't get yourself in a jam.
And again, remember that the world in general was still somewhat naive about the magnitude of this issue and the gravity of the problem.
This investigation began with a resource referral from a local district attorney's office back in 2019. Based on that referral, our office undertook the investigation of allegations of sexual assault involving members of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Throughout that, we learned of several incidents of sexual assault committed by different members of the Jehovah's Witness religious organizations. And as a result of our 3-year investigation, hundreds of hours of grand jury testimony, and dozens of witnesses, we filed charges against 4 individuals.
Our literature has said, and we agree, that in most cases with children with child abuse, they are telling the truth. That's an established thing. They're not making up these stories.
First, Jose Serrano, 69, of Lancaster County. During the investigation, it was determined that Jose Serrano used his influence and common faith to sexually molest at least 6 minors, including his own daughter. He confessed to committing many of these criminal offenses to members of his community.
Others knew of the problem and covered it up.
How can we demonstrate that we do deeply respect and appreciate these dear brothers? The first way, by wholeheartedly cooperating with them. Be obedient. Clearly, this means that we're supposed to comply with or obey what they tell us. Be submissive. This includes the attitude with which we're to be obedient. Doing so with a yielding, positive attitude. We should be obedient and submissive even if what the elders are asking us to do is not the best, most efficient way to do something.
Our elders give of their time and provide this counselling help as they're able to in the course of their life on a voluntary basis.
But there isn't any formal counselling service, referral service to local counselling services?
No, there isn't.
Be obedient and submissive to the elders. So why don't we go ahead and support the elders?
Can I just ask you about one particular piece of language? Why do you say, in these circumstances, you both say you never discourage and they may report? Why don't you encourage reporting? I suppose this is all, I would say, quite passive. in terms of, on the one hand, you're an organisation which stresses strict adherence to moral codes, but you're not saying to them, you must do this, you should do this, it should always be reported. It's all much more kind of, we tell them that they can, which seems to be strangely passive for an organisation which is so active in other parts of people's lives.
Do you think the brothers who write Watchtower articles are living in the real world?
The reality is that what's often happened is matters haven't been reported to the police, but have been dealt with internally.
Being obedient and submissive to those taking the lead is much more important than how something is done. That is the attitude that Jehovah will richly bless.
You don't conduct, there are no external audits conducted of your child protection policies and practices, are there?
That's correct.
And is there any reason for that?
Because our policies are very weighted with how to deal with things within the congregation.
By going to the elders for assistance.
Serrano was charged with aggravated indecent assault, and endangering the welfare of children. Jesse Hill, 52 years old, formerly of Berks County, Pennsylvania. Our investigation identified at least 10 victims of Mr. Hill's sexual crimes. Jesse Hill is charged with rape, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, and corruption of minors. Robert Ostrander, 56 years old, formerly of Cambria County. Ostrander is charged with indecent assault, endangering the welfare of children, and corruption of minors. And finally, Eric Elam, 61 years old, of Butler County. The grand jurors heard testimony from Elam's daughter about the sexual abuse she suffered. She reported this abuse to her mother and to other members of her community.
Brother Elder, we just want to thank you for your hard work. Please be assured that we appreciate it.
As I understand, your elders or ministerial servants, either within the congregation or the branch office or circuit overseers, wouldn't have DBS checks other than what we would call basic DBS checks. None of them would meet the definition of regulated activity as you see it. Is that right?
That is correct.
Thank you very much.
As a religious organization, we have taken a decisive stand against such behavior.
Elam was charged by my office with rape, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, aggravated indecent assault, and endangering the welfare of a child.
We're happy to see how Jehovah's organization continues to teach our young ones how to make wise choices when the figurative monsters of this world try to lure them into their traps.
These 4 presentments lay out the nature of our investigation, but I want you to know this investigation is very active and ongoing.
What we see is often only the tip of the iceberg. 90% of an iceberg is unseen underwater.
As the prosecution begins, I think more information will be presented as we make our case.
And if I can also check, there is an ongoing investigation into the Watchtower, which I think has been ongoing for a number of years.
What has our position been as an organization?
We maintain the position that their inquiry is an inquiry into Watchtower, which doesn't have any concerns about child protection in the sense that it doesn't administer child protection. Whatever the inquiry suggests, we will cooperate with any regulatory body just the same as we've cooperated with the Charity Commission.
Okay. Obviously, the Charity Commission have indicated in their new Mostyn report that they considered that the trustees in that report didn't cooperate, and they also noted that you sought to prevent the inquiry taking place, running various legal arguments around it for a number of years. That's also correct, isn't it?
Yes.
It is our fervent desire to protect children from any kind of abuse.
So it has been frustrating that we've had 5 lead investigators over the period, and every time we've engaged with each one, we've tried to go over the same ground again, explaining our policy. So that's been a frustration to us.
It is clear that over the decades, protecting children from abuse is a top priority for this organization. We are proud of our reputation in this regard.
Are there other suspects that you're still investigating, and do you have any reason to believe that nationally this could be a bigger national case with more suspects in other states?
All I can say is that our case is active and ongoing.
5 names announced today bring a total of 9 people since October last year who are facing charges in connection to that investigating grand jury.
These cases, as all of them are disturbing and sad. But this one, in particular, digs deeper. Because in this case, all of the defendants and all of the victims come from the same religious organization, the Jehovah's Witnesses. Let me begin first with Mark Brown, 65 of Allegheny County. Brown is charged with aggravated indecent assault, endangering the welfare of children, and corruption of minors. The next case is Raymond Schultz, 74 of Beaver County. He's been charged with aggravated indecent assault, endangering the welfare of children, and corruption of minors. The next case is Abamil Valentine Matos, 42 of Lancaster County. He's been charged with indecent assault, indecent exposure, endangering the welfare of children, and corruption of minor. The next case is Kevin Isevich, 51 of Butler County. He's been charged with rape, aggravated indecent assault, endangering the welfare of children, and corruption of minors. The next case is Norman Aviles, 44 of Lancaster County. He has been charged with aggravated indecent assault, endangering the welfare of children, and corruption of minors.
The latter part of our discussion has addressed what Jehovah's organization has done to protect children from predators.
There are individuals who will abuse the privilege of being in the congregation if they're allowed to.
Let's not be naive.
This is a warning to be able to say, you look, it does happen. And it could be anyone in the congregation that does that.
Let's not be naive.
Protect your children.
From what I understand, Jehovah's Witness has its own internal judicial system. Have you investigated if they were aware of this, if they looked into it, and if so, will you be looking at the organization for any charges?
So now we're 9 deep, okay? Now, we've already got 9 cases that were covered up.
Wow.
So now here's where I'm going to tell you the big news. What I'm here to tell you today is that the Jehovah's Witnesses have been subpoenaed. Every single congregation in the state of Pennsylvania is now under subpoena, 1 county at a time, to turn over every single child abuse document in their possession going back to January 1st, 1987 up to about September of 2019, which is when those first subpoenas went out in York County, Pennsylvania. 1987 to 2019. Every elder is being called into a meeting with lawyers that have been hired by the society. The Watchtower Legal Department and the governing body have hired the same law firm that defended the Catholic Church.
Will you be looking at the organization for any charges?
This is an ongoing investigation. Any other questions?
Hey. That's Jehovah's enemies. They're going to vanish like smoke.